Welcome back to the GMP and Quality Fundamentals series, and this is Lecture 17. In Lecture 9, we introduced audits and inspections at a high level. Today, we go much deeper. This is the complete guide to running an internal audit from the very first planning step all the way through to verifying that findings have been fixed. Most quality professionals have experience being audited. Far fewer know how to run one properly. By the end of this lecture, you will know both sides of the table. Let us begin. Here is what we will cover today. Number 1, you will understand what an internal audit is, why it is a regulatory requirement, and what its real purpose is. Number 2, you will learn all 5 phases of the audit cycle in detail: planning, preparation, execution, reporting, and follow-up. Number 3, you will know how to classify audit findings as critical, major, or minor, and what each classification demands in terms of response. Number 4, you will understand what separates a good auditor from a poor one. And number 5, you will learn the specific techniques used during audit execution: opening meetings, trail following, and questioning. Let us start with the fundamentals. What exactly is an internal audit? An internal audit is a systematic, independent, and documented examination of whether your quality activities comply with your own procedures, GMP regulations, and planned arrangements, and whether those activities are actually effective in practice. There are 4 key things to understand about internal audits. First, they are required by regulation. EU GMP Part 1 Chapter 9 requires a self-inspection program. FDA 21 CFR Part 211 requires self-inspection. ICHQ 10 includes internal audit as a core element of a pharmaceutical quality system. If you do not have a documented audit program, that in itself is a finding in any regulatory inspection. Second, they must be independent. The auditor must not audit their own area. A QA person auditing production. A production manager auditing the warehouse. The independence protects objectivity. If you audit your own team, you have a conflict of interest and your findings carry no credibility. Third, they are planned in advance. Internal audits follow an annual audit schedule that is approved by management. High-risk areas are audited more frequently. Audit schedules are reviewed during management review meetings. And fourth, the purpose is to find and fix problems on your own terms. The goal is not to catch people making mistakes. The goal is to identify gaps in your quality system before a regulator finds them. Every internal finding you identify and correct is a finding you controlled. Every finding an inspector discovers first is a finding that costs you much more. The internal audit process follows 5 phases, and every single one of them matters. Let me walk you through all 5. Phase 1 is planning. This is where you define the scope, assign the audit team, schedule the date, and build the checklist. Phase 2 is preparation. This is where you study the area before you go in. Review the relevant SOPs, previous audit findings, and recent deviation history. Phase 3 is execution. This is the audit itself. The opening meeting, the evidence trail, the interviews, the note-taking. Phase 4 is reporting. After the audit, findings are classified, the report is written, and it is issued to the auditee and management. Phase 5 is follow-up. This is where most audit programs break down. You review the CAPA responses, verify they were implemented, and formally close the findings. Skip any one of these phases and the audit loses its value. An audit without follow-up is just paperwork. An audit without preparation is just a conversation. All 5 phases are required. Let us go through phases 1 and 2 in detail. Phase 1, planning. Define the scope before anything else. Which department will you audit? Which specific processes? Which regulatory standards apply? A well-defined scope prevents the audit from becoming unfocused and prevents the auditee from feeling ambushed. Assign your audit team. The lead auditor must be independent from the area being audited. If you are auditing the microbiology laboratory, the lead auditor cannot be someone who works in that laboratory, even part-time. Notify the auditee in writing, at least 2 weeks in advance. Confirm the date, the time, the location, the scope, and the names of the audit team. A formal notification letter or email is the professional standard. Develop your audit checklist based on the relevant SOPs, the GMP requirements for this area, and the findings from the previous audit of this department. The checklist is your guide, not your cage. You should be prepared to follow the evidence wherever it leads. Phase 2, Preparation. Read all the relevant SOPs for the area before the audit day. You cannot assess compliance with a procedure you have not read. This sounds obvious, but it is one of the most common preparation failures. Review the previous audit report for this area. Are there findings that were supposedly closed? You will want to verify those closures during the audit. Review recent deviations, OS investigations, and CAPAs related to this area. If there have been 3 deviations in the past 6 months related to equipment cleaning, that area should be on your trail. And finally, prepare your audit plan. A written plan that shows the sequence of activities for the audit day, which documents you will request, which processes you will observe, and which people you need to speak with. Share this plan with your co-auditor if you have one. Phase 3, Execution. The audit day. Every internal audit starts with an opening meeting. This is a brief formal meeting with the manager of the area being audited and any other key personnel. You introduce the audit team, confirm the scope and the agenda, and explain the purpose. This is critically important. You must communicate clearly that this audit is a system check, not a personal evaluation of the individuals in the room. People become defensive and closed when they feel personally judged. An open, professional opening meeting sets the tone for a productive audit. Then comes the audit trail. This is the heart of the audit. You pick a process and follow it from beginning to end. In a laboratory, you might start at sample receipt and follow the sample all the way through testing, data entry, result review, and batch release. As you follow the process, you collect evidence. Request the SOP. Then request the batch record or the LIMS entry. Then compare what the SOP requires to what the record shows. Then ask the analyst to demonstrate a step and compare what you observe to both the SOP and the record. A well-executed audit trail creates 3 lines of evidence that must all be consistent. What the procedure says. What the records show. What you observe happening. When any 2 of those lines do not match, you have a potential finding. Take detailed notes as you go. Record document titles and version numbers. Record equipment IDs and calibration dates. Record batch numbers and sample IDs. The more specific your notes, the stronger your findings will be. For questioning, always use open questions. Ask, how do you do this step? Ask, can you show me what happens next? Ask, what would you do if this result came back out of specification? Open questions reveal understanding and practice. Closed questions that can be answered yes or no reveal nothing useful. If something does not match, ask again calmly and from a different angle. Never confront or accuse. Seek the evidence, and let the evidence speak. After execution comes finding classification. Not everything you find is equally serious, and your classification determines how urgently the organization must respond. A critical finding is one that poses an immediate risk to product quality, patient safety, or data integrity. The defining word is immediate. Examples include a batch being released without QA approval, data that has been deliberately altered or deleted, or a contamination event that was not investigated or reported. When you have a critical finding, the process may need to stop. The response is required within 24 to 48 hours. A recall assessment may be needed. In some regulatory jurisdictions, the authority must be notified. A major finding is a significant failure that could lead to product quality problems if not corrected but does not represent an immediate safety risk. Examples include an incomplete deviation investigation, missing training records for analysts performing GMP testing, or a SOP that was not followed without any documented justification. Major findings require a full CAPA response within 30 days. The root cause must be identified and the corrective action must be implemented and documented. A minor finding or observation is a low-risk nonconformance, or an area for improvement that does not directly compromise product quality or patient safety. Examples include a minor documentation error that was already corrected during the audit, an SOP that is slightly overdue for review but has not caused any compliance issues, or a suggestion for improving a process beyond its current standard. Minor findings require corrective action within 60 to 90 days and can often be addressed through existing process improvement activities. One important rule: if you are unsure whether a finding is major or critical, classify it as critical. It is always better to overclassify and have the team review downward than to underclassify and leave a serious risk inadequately addressed. One of the most important skills in auditing is writing findings clearly. A vague finding is almost useless. The auditee cannot investigate it properly. The CAPA that results will be inadequate. And when the next auditor comes in, they will not know whether the original problem was actually fixed. Look at the difference between a poor finding and a good one on this slide. The poor finding says, training records were not available for some analysts in the QC laboratory. This tells us nothing actionable. Which analysts? Which training? Which laboratory? When? Against which requirement? The good finding says, training records for analysts AB001, AB003, and AB007 on SOP QC012, which is the HPLC operation procedure, were not found in the training management system during the audit conducted on June 4, 2026. Per SOP QA003 Section 4.2, all analysts must hold documented training before performing GMP testing. This is classified as a major finding. That second finding can be investigated. It names the people involved. It names the specific procedure. It gives the date. It quotes the requirement that was not met. And it gives the classification. That is a finding that leads to a real corrective action. 4 rules for every finding you write. Be specific. Name the document, the batch number, the equipment ID, the analyst reference. Vague findings cannot be fixed. State the evidence and the requirement not met. Every finding is a combination of what you observed and the standard that it fails to meet. Classify correctly and justify the classification. The auditee needs to know how urgently to respond, and never assign blame to individuals. Findings are written against the system, not against people. You write that the system allowed an unqualified analyst to perform GMP testing. You do not write that analyst number 7 did not know the SOP. Phase 4, the audit report. The audit report is typically issued within 10 business days of the audit closing meeting. It is a formal quality document that requires review and approval before it is distributed to the auditee and management. A professional audit report has 6 sections. The cover page shows the audit reference number, the date, the area that was audited, the lead auditor name, and a summary of findings by classification level. This is the one-page snapshot. The executive summary is 2 to 3 paragraphs giving the overall assessment of the area's compliance state. What was the general impression? What were the most significant issues? Management reads this section first. The scope and criteria section defines what was audited, which regulations and SOPs were used as the reference standard, and what was explicitly excluded from scope. The findings section is the core of the report. Each finding has its own clear entry with a unique reference number, the classification, the specific evidence observed, and the requirement that was not met. A good practice section notes genuinely positive observations from the audit, not empty praise. Specific examples of best practice that were observed and that other departments could learn from. This section builds credibility with the auditee and makes the overall report more balanced. And finally, the response deadlines. Clear dates by which the auditee must submit their CAPA response for each finding. Critical findings within 48 hours. Major findings within 30 days. Minor findings within 60 to 90 days. Phase 5, follow-up. This is where most audit programs fail. An audit finding is not closed when the auditee submits their CAPA response. It is only closed when the auditor or QA has reviewed the evidence and confirmed that the corrective action was implemented and is actually effective. That final verification step is what separates a mature audit program from a box-ticking exercise. The follow-up process has 5 steps. The auditee submits their CAPA response by the agreed deadline. This should include the root cause analysis, the corrective action plan, and the implementation evidence. Not a promise of what they will do. Evidence of what they have done. The auditor reviews the response. Ask 3 questions. Was the root cause genuinely identified? Is the corrective action appropriate to close this specific finding? Is the evidence of implementation specific and verifiable? The effectiveness check happens after implementation. Go back to the area. Review updated records. Reobserve the process. Talk to the analyst. Did the problem actually go away? A CAPA that looks good on paper but did not change the behavior in the lab is not an effective CAPA. Once effectiveness is confirmed, the finding is formally closed in your audit tracking system. The closure date is recorded against the unique finding reference number. And finally, all of this becomes input for the next audit. Were any findings repeated from the previous cycle? Repeat findings signal that the root cause was never truly addressed. Escalate repeat findings to management review. They need senior attention. Let me finish the technical content with the characteristics of a good auditor, because your skills and mindset as an auditor matter as much as the process you follow. A good auditor prepares thoroughly and knows the SOP before walking into the area. They follow the evidence wherever it leads, not just the checklist. They ask open questions and listen more than they talk. They document specific evidence for every finding and remain objective even when the auditee becomes defensive. They acknowledge what is working well before focusing on what is not. And they issue the report on time. On the other hand, the most common auditor mistakes are these: auditing your own area and pretending you can be objective. Arriving unprepared with no checklist and no SOP knowledge. Writing vague findings that cannot be investigated. Getting distracted by trivial issues and missing significant ones. Using intimidating behavior that makes the auditee close up and stop sharing information. Accepting verbal assurances without asking for the documentary evidence. And worst of all, never verifying that the CAPA responses actually fix the problem. Auditing is a professional skill. The more audits you conduct, the better you become. Many of the best auditors in GMP organizations started as the person being audited, which gives them empathy for both sides of the process. Let us bring this lecture together. 6 things to remember. Number 1. Internal audits are a GMP regulatory requirement. EU GMP Chapter 9 and FDA 21 CFR 211 both mandate documented self-inspection programs. Not having one is itself a finding. Number 2. The audit cycle has 5 phases: planning, preparation, execution, reporting, and follow-up. All 5 are required. The value of the audit collapses when any phase is skipped. Number 3. Execution is about following the evidence trail. The 3 lines of evidence must all be consistent. What the SOP says, what the records show, and what you observe happening. Number 4. Findings are classified as critical, major, or minor. Each level demands a different response time and a different depth of investigation. When in doubt, classify up. Number 5. A good finding is specific. It names the evidence, quotes the requirement that was not met, gives a classification, and targets the system, not the individual. Vague findings cannot be fixed. Number 6. An audit is not complete when the report is issued. It is complete when the corrective action has been implemented and verified as effective. That final verification step is non-negotiable. That is Lecture 17 complete. Coming next in Lecture 18, we look at the other side of the table. Regulatory inspections. You run internal audits to prepare for this moment. In Lecture 18, you will learn what FDA and EMA inspectors actually focus on when they arrive, how inspections are structured, what triggers enhanced scrutiny, and how to handle a Form 483 observation or a warning letter. If this lecture helped you, please give it a like. Subscribe if you are not already. And leave your questions in the comments below. I read and replied to everyone. I will see you in Lecture 18.